Live with courage. Keep your word. That's the code of the West.
Hello, and welcome to the Code of the West podcast. I'm back. It's been a bit. For those of you who are new to Code of the West, I say new as in, shown up since February or so. I used to do this pretty much from the beginning back in Sorry, I'm getting my notes out, keeping my notes in my handy dandy Code of the West Daily Record journal. Anyways, back in 2022, when Code of the West started, I started the podcast. I started the company, for lack of a better way of calling it. Just kind of threw caution to the wind, just talking to the wall, basically. And I was figuring things out. So I thought, why not start a podcast? And it was pretty interesting. It's pretty cathartic, and it was a good way to get my feet wet on the whole thing, because it took me a little bit to figure out how to really talk about what I was trying to say with Code of the West. So it's good to be back. Take a sip of my. There's going to be a little bit of shameless plugging throughout this whole thing, and then it'll make sense later. Having some early to ride Code of the West ground coffee this morning. It will all make sense eventually. So I thought, since I haven't done this for a while, it'd be good to introduce myself, give a little bit of the backstory on Code of the West, and then really the real goal of today is to talk about where it's going and what's going on right now. So to begin, my name is Chris Hunt, and I am the founder of Code of the West. Sorry, it's like it's 5 a.m. right now. I didn't sleep at all last night, and I already recorded this podcast, but I haven't done this in so long that I didn't record any audio when I did it. So hopefully the second time is better. So my name's Chris Hunt. What did I do before Code of the West, or what led to Code of the West? Well, since I was a very little kid, my dream had been to write and draw comic books, and somehow I was able to do that. I say somehow because it's a very odd career to try to break into, and it requires a lot of effort and practice and time, and there is a career path towards it. You just have to figure it out. So I did that from 21 to, let me think. I mean, I really was doing comics until about 2019, 2020, actually 2020. But I had more or less left comics in 2018, took a year off, and worked at a Filson store, of all things, which Filson is a part of my origin story as well. And then got back into drawing full-time, consulting, and doing a couple comics before I ended up at Black Rifle. And if you're not familiar with Black Rifle Coffee, it is a veteran-founded now, because it went public. So it's a veteran-founded coffee company. It started as a coffee club subscription. Now it's in Walmart and a bunch of different grocery stores, which is pretty cool. And I started working for Evan Hafer, who was the original founder of Black Rifle. He got a hold of me through Instagram in 2019, and we stayed in contact. And then what happened in March of 2020 happened. As the sky was falling, Evan texted me. He was like, "Hey, do you want to do a coffee bag?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" And that was kind of, that was the start of it. So at Black Rifle, I had to work with the existing design team and the founders and rebrand the coffee bags. If you followed if you followed Black Rifle Coffee at all, you'd know that originally their bags were just black bags with text on them. After I showed up, we made a plan to take all those bags and essentially make comic book covers out of them, which is a really cool thing to be able to do. I love the fact that we elevated a consumable product like that. Excuse me, wolfed down a almond butter sandwich before I started recording this. So that was really cool. I got to be an art director and build an art department and mentor and rebrand an entire coffee company before going into a public offering. So get to put that feather in my cap, and then ended up helping to design, iterate, and get across the line the coffee bags for Walmart, which was the first time that Black Rifle went into grocery stores. So that was pretty cool. And in that time frame, I started Code of the West because I wanted to have my own sandbox to play around in. I love Black Rifle, but it wasn't mine. So I could only do so much with it. So I created Code of the West kind of on a lark, actually. I'd just been talking to Josh Smith of Montana Knife Company. I think it was Christmas Eve day. And he and I used to talk quite a bit. And, he'd pick my brain about what was going on at Black Rifle. And he and Brandon were building Montana Knife Company. And we were kind of comparing notes. And, he was trying to figure out what he could do to sort of lay the foundation for MKC. And I was just trying to help and also, I guess, take notes and hope that I could find my thing, my passion, even though I knew what my passion was, it's drawing and telling stories. I didn't know how to package it up as a thing for myself. So anyways, I'm talking to Josh, and I remember saying like, because Josh, check out Montana Knife Company, because I mean it's a cool company, and Brandon and Josh have done an incredible thing with it. But Josh is the youngest master bladesmith ever, like ever, and he's not young anymore. Sorry, Josh. But at the time when he became that, he was the youngest, and so at that time, I believe it was his mom told him to take a LLC name out because he had this idea that he wanted to create an American manufacturing company down the road called Montana Knife Company. So he'd had that company name for I think 20 years or so before they actually even started the company. So for me, I'm thinking this is, I love helping people. He was transitioning out of his job as a lineman because that's how he was paying the bills at the time. So I was really trying to help him. I was doing illustration stuff for him as well. And so I just remember telling him, like, I hope someday that I have my own thing that I can pour my passions into. And he's like, yeah, you'll get there. Yeah, just keep going. And oddly enough, it was about 24 hours later that the idea for Code of the West just popped into my head. And initially, all it was just a drawing that I did. It was a drawing of a charging bull, which I actually it became the first T-shirt that I eventually did. But I mocked it up just as a fake T-shirt. I just made a fake looking T-shirt and put it on Instagram, and a bunch of people started reacting. This is on my personal Instagram. There was no Code of the West Instagram at that time, and I put it up, and a lot of people were wondering what it was, or where they could get it. Even Evan was like, "Who's this for?" And I was like, "It's just me messing around. I can take it down if you want." He's like, "No, you crazy gooberhead." He didn't say crazy gooberhead. He said something way more salty. But I'm going to try to keep my potty mouth to a minimum. So we'll just say he said silly gooberhead. How about that? So I was encouraged to keep going a little bit. And I made a little logo for Code of the West, which I don't do logos. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm an illustrator, and as a creative director and an art director, that's fine because I'm not usually the person doing all the things, but I have, even though I'm not a logo person, it doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to assess what a good logo is. I'm not good at making them. But for some reason, I just sat down and I just made the logo for Code of the West. And it was just very odd. It was like this, I just sat down and channeled something. And that's really that's a theme of Code of the West for me, is that it just feels like I'm tuning into a radio station most of the time. So anywho, it just kind of spiraled from there. I actually stopped at Josh's house like about a week later for New Year's Eve, coming back from Northern Idaho here down to Salt Lake to go back to my job in Black Rifle. And on my way down there, friend Jack Carr, author, he posted about Code of the West, and that's when I broke my first 1,000 people on Code of the West. And I thought that was, well, it was a big deal for me because I'd never tried to do something that was beyond myself. I'd always just been Chris Hunt, the cartoonist, Chris Hunt, the creative director, Chris Hunt, the art director. I'd never made something that wasn't just a representation of me, as what I was doing for my job. This was the first time I was building a brand, trying to tell a story and trying to reach people, beyond just getting a job. So I was really, really encouraged, and I really appreciated the help and the boost from people like Jack and Josh and Brandon Lilly over at Sorinex Outdoors. And I got back to Black Rifle, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's kind of cute. You're going to start your own company." And Evan didn't have a problem with me messing around with it because he knew I was going to experiment and be learning about things. I was going to have to learn Shopify, learn the granular aspects of really what we were doing at Black Rifle in a lot of ways with e-com, direct to consumer. And I was already designing shirts. I already understood the production workflow and pipeline that we had at Black Rifle because at that time we had a print shop out back. So it was just kind of a little masterclass for me. And so nobody really thought anything of it, nor did I. But but one of the things that once I came up with the idea and I knew it was something I really cared about, and I was trying to define where it would go in the first couple of weeks, I decided that beyond just drawing cowboys, I wanted it to mean something and to represent something to myself and people. And there was a book that Evan had given me called Built to Last. And I used to read a lot of business books. I still do, but just I slowed down a little bit over time. But this book, without getting too far into the weeds on it, it essentially was a study of the more long-term sustainable companies in the world in a certain period of time. And there were some certain commonalities that the authors and the researchers found. And a lot of the companies that had staying power, companies like IBM, Disney, all had these guiding principles and what they called big, hairy, audacious goals. So I was thinking to myself, I should come up with a BHAG for Code of the West. And I was sitting in my old office that I used to share with my friend and coworker Gary Stevens, and just is like, you know what? I want to save America's soul. I mean, that seemed like a pretty audacious goal to me. And my way of articulating that was bring back America's shared story and shared sense of identity. Because as a person who's really mired in storytelling, I think that story is incredibly powerful, and it's the thing it can be, and oftentimes is something that unites us, as fans. And I think that once upon a time we had a story that we understood about ourselves that we were all a part of, even if we were from different parts of the world arriving here, or our heritages were different. There was a sense of what it meant to be an American, and that was to be good and to aspire to more and to have the freedom to pursue what she wanted to pursue. And I thought that would be a pretty cool goal to have, to try to carve out a little corner, the internet, I guess, or the world, to try to inspire myself and other people to just represent those good parts of ourselves. I said that, I wrote it down. I had no idea how I was going to do it. And it took me 2 years to figure it out. Even with all my storytelling experience, my art, or abilities in art, creating art, writing scripts, writing books, it still took me a while to figure out how to say it. I think, I compare it to writers finding their own voice, when they're learning to write their first novel. It just took me a second to figure out how to use things like Instagram in order to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And I kept getting my repetitions in. I did my first drop with the bull shirt, which is the never corner something meaner than you. And I just brought that back. Actually, it's up in the store, because it was the first drop, and I just never brought it back. And that was the first drop was, a very, very limited drop. So there's only probably about, I'd say, 100 of those original shirts floating around. But anywho, I got to the point later in the summer where Evan was interested in rolling Code of the West into Black Rifle. And without getting too far into the weeds on that part of the story, it did almost happen. We ended up doing a drop in 2023 that was a very limited drop, Code of the West drop with Black Rifle, where I designed a coffee bag and a hat and a shirt that was part of a limited drop, and it did really well. It sold out in 23 hours. I was really proud of it, super stoked. And the idea was we were going to do like a Western line of coffee bags and shirts and the whole 9 yards inside of Black Rifle. But Black Rifle had gone public. When you go public, you can't completely. It just things change, Like it's not the same as when it's a private company and you can kind of just be footloose and fancy free. And a lot of people didn't really understand what I was trying to do. Evan did, and a handful of others, and those are the people that helped me do it. I mean, it was very by hook or by crook. We like even the whole photo shoot for it for the social media stuff was just everybody that was my friend at Black Rifle helping out, being a model, taking photos after hours in the coffee shop. It was a lot of fun. We just MacGyvered it together, and so it basically became apparent at a certain point that despite the fact that a lot of us were excited to do Code of the West at Black Rifle, it just wasn't going to work out at Black Rifle. And necessary changes had started to occur after we'd gone public. And I was a bit of a pirate. I'm a bit of an outside dog. I'm not really like a corporate person. If you follow along with Code of the West, you probably would have picked up on that by now. And, if I'm a pirate, I want to be on a pirate ship. I don't want to be on a Navy ship. So it very amicably, it was just sort of time for me to, move on to the next thing. And the next thing was being a creative director for a couple of outdoor brands like Cryptek and PSE. And that's been a really interesting experience. A lot of what I was doing as the art director at Black Rifle was essentially creative direction as well. So it wasn't really that different to me, and kept building Code of the West, kept getting my repetitions in. So this would have been March of last year that I left Black Rifle and went to Heritage, which is the startup company that I've been working for. In that time frame of leaving Black Rifle, I decided that I didn't think that I was living up to my own standards as far as what I was espousing with the Code of the West. To be better, to do the uncomfortable things. I'd never really taken care of myself and my health, didn't have any work-life balance. So Dan, my stepdad, and I started what I've been calling Fat Camp, and started changing our eating habits, started working out and exercising. I'm about ready to actually, after this is done, I'm done recording this, we're going to go work out and do Fat Camp workout. But, I was 70 pounds overweight and, eating like a very, very bad diet of just convenience and processed foods. And so I realized I needed to work on myself. So I worked on myself, and Go to the West, I would say, kind of just hung out for a little bit last year in the summertime until I went down to my first branding with the Lyman's, and that was incredible. And that really changed the tone for me. That it stopped being this hypothetical little. I was really uncomfortable at the beginning with the idea of, well, I just didn't know where I fit into it because I'm not a cowboy. I've said before, I was raised by Dan. Dan's a cowboy. He grew up, on a ranch. My dad is a truck driver, and I grew up crisscrossing the country. Truck drivers are their own thing, but they're also very, very similar to cowboys in my experience. And then I was raised on, work on construction sites and trucks. So I have this very odd background of being like a creative white collar kind of person that grew up doing just really, hard, excuse me, doing hard manual labor since I was really little, actually. I understood the world that I was talking about, but I just couldn't go out and say I was a cowboy. So, and I still can't say that. I never will be able to say that because it's never going to be my occupation as far as I know. Stranger things have happened though. So I didn't know where I fit into my own story. I felt very uncomfortable and kind of like the odd man out, trying to be this person that was telling stories about cowboys and Western culture, even though I grew up in Idaho and I grew up doing these hard things. I just didn't know. And I got to thinking about Louis L'Amour over the summer of last year and into the fall, because we were looking at a lot of Louis L'Amour stuff when we were designing those coffee bags at Black Rifle that would have been a part of the line. And I'm a big fan of Louis L'Amour and his books. And he's got an autobiography called Education of a Wandering Man. And even though he's known as a Western writer, he's not a cowboy. He did a lot of different stuff. He was a merchant sailor. He was a miner. He just did a lot of things, had a lot of adventures, and lived a lot. But he didn't go and work as a cowpuncher, but that didn't stop him from being able to write Westerns. And so I thought to myself, well, okay, that's my job here. My job is to have that ability to tell us and elevate my friends and family in this way of life in my country. And I can do that authentically. I don't have to pretend to be anything that I'm not. I'm just Chris, and I tell stories, and I want to tell stories about these types of people and these types of experiences. So that gave me a lot of confidence and encouragement going into last year. The end of last year, started the coffee. That's a whole different story. I basically had to start the coffee because I have to preserve my trademark from somebody who's been trying to get it for a while. And maybe I'll talk about that at some point publicly, but it's just pretty ridiculous who it is and what the organization is. But it's kind of funny if it wasn't. But that was a force of function, I guess is what I'm saying. But it's here. I have it. Super proud of it. Like it's the first time I've drawn. I don't know if you can see it. First time that I've drawn my own coffee bag after doing so many for Black Rifle. And going into the start of this year, I was feeling good. I didn't really know what the trajectory, the timeline was going to be, but I was getting better. I was getting healthier. And I was making inroads, I would say, in connections and networking. And then February rolled around, and I was back down in Salt Lake, and my mom called me and told me that she had cancer. And at the time, we didn't know how bad it was going to be, which I didn't know that about cancer, that they can tell you have cancer, but unless it's real, real, real bad, like you're dying bad, they can't really tell you on the scale how bad it is until you go through a battery of tests and figure it out. So for about a month, we didn't really know what was going to happen, how bad it was going to be. Had some real serious heart-to-heart conversations with my mom, who's very pragmatic. I jokingly refer to her as Sarah Connor, if you've ever seen Terminator movies. And around that same time, I was just I had started writing the sequel to my graphic novel, Carver, a Paris Story. So before quitting comics, my goal had always been to write and draw my own comic book, graphic novel, whatever you want to call it. And I had written this book called Carver, a Paris Story, which is sort of my Indiana Jones Hemingway book. It's something that I just wanted to see more of at the time. It is very much a part of the story of Code of the West and how I got to Code of the West. And in that that was the first time in my life where I saw a gap in what I would say, I saw a gap in popular culture, but more, I guess what I would say is I saw a gap in what our conversations were, who our heroes were, the types of stories that you would see floating around. And I missed the John McClanes and the Indiana Jones characters. So I thought I'd create my own. And that was a huge accomplishment for me. It had been my childhood dream. And it won IGN.com Graphic Novel of the Year in 2016. It just did a lot better than I expected. But for reasons beyond my control, which is a theme of Code of the West. It just, I couldn't get my career off the ground after that. It was a very specific type of story. Was not really going to get me jobs at Marvel or DC. Not that I wanted those jobs, but I guess, maybe looking back, people just didn't know what to do with me and had to move on. So I had decided that I was just going to write the sequel to Carver starting in January. And I got pretty far into it, into the outline, the research, and I was just writing again. It felt really good to be writing again. And I love creating worlds and telling stories. And so around the time that my mom told me what was happening in her life, I've been getting my repetitions back in, getting that muscle memory back of writing all the time and thinking in those terms. And for whatever reason, I just thought back on the Louis L'Amour book, or books rather. And I have a bookshelf at home, has my Louis books on them. And I was just kind of thumbing through one, and I was like, you know what? I wonder if I just like found a quote that I thought represented Code of the West, and then found an image or used one of my images to pair with that, and just put some music to it. See how that, I just maybe that'll help me kind of express something. Because up to that point, I was doing kind of, I wouldn't say meme stuff, but I just, I would just post some pictures of, Doc Holliday or Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, or it's just real hit or miss. I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say. And I wasn't really saying anything, to be honest. I was just putting things up, and, getting a little wild. So I arbitrarily just found a quote in one of the books, found a piece of art that I thought reflected it well, accidentally found this song from this band called Hawk and Horse called Free, and put it up. And it wasn't like it went viral, but it did something, which was more than most of anything that I posted at Code of the West. I had people that I'd never talked to before showing up and commenting and following, maybe a few dozen, but I was like, okay, this is, I'm onto something here. So I did it again the next day, but I did a little bit better. I was a little bit more focused on the quote and pairing the art. And then I wrote a lot more in the caption. And I was like, well, I could talk about what this means to me, like what this quote triggers in my mind or reminds me of, or a story that I think relates to it. Had a little bit more activity. Kept doing it. And after about a week and a half, all of a sudden, this pile of momentum occurred. I remember when it passed my personal account, Lazy Fair, which is about 7,000. And I was like, this is crazy. That, like I said earlier, that thing that I created that's beyond me, that is some attempt to create something for other people, has surpassed me as an individual on Instagram. And I felt really good about that. And it just kept gathering steam after that. And so on one hand, I'm not sure what's going to happen to my mom, and I'm pretty terrified of it, and realizing I have to find another gear for all this. Sorry. Because I don't know. I mean, nothing in life is guaranteed. You never really know how much time you have with the time with the people around you. And I wanted her to know that it was going to be okay, and that I was going to be okay. And I wanted to hopefully get Code of the West to this point where it was sustainable if something was going to happen to her before she was gone. And that really drove me at that time to just go all in and try to ride the momentum. Yeah, pretty quickly it became a thing. It went from 7,000 to 10,000, and that was a big day for me. For whatever reason, to see it cross the 10,000 mark threshold was more significant, I think, than it crossing the 100,000 mark eventually, about a month and a half ago. About a month and a half ago. So I just kind of rode that train, and then had to drink from the fire hose and try to reverse engineer what I was doing and understand things better. And it turns out that I was onto something. My goal with using social media with Code of the West was to do it in the way that no one does it right now, which is I don't want to use any of the really what I consider kind of like the snake oily tactics of trying to like upset people, get them scared, get them wound up, get them mad at you. So they're saying things in the comments, because all that stuff spools people up, and that increases engagement, and that increases your reach, and yada, yada, yada. And I just don't like that. And I think it's part of the problem that we have in the world, and especially in our country right now, which is we don't even realize that we're being manipulated by each other just to get likes and views on things. And so I wanted to try to see if I could create the experience and the community at Code of the West by being myself, by just being earnest and as authentic as I could within reason, through the magic pocket computer. And it worked. And so I've been reverse engineering it since then, and trying to understand exactly what I was doing or what I am doing and how to keep it going, and then also how to help other people, which I'm starting to be able to do that now. I've been playing around with that at Cryptech and PSE to some extent, and then helping friends out here and there now that I have a pretty good understanding of what it is that I accidentally Mr. Magoo'd my way into. So that brings us up to more or less the past month. Code of the West hit 100,000, which is incredible, and it's probably going to roll over to 125,000 today, which is insane. And where do we go from here? My day job has been my safety net, and I've talked about this quite a bit. It's what's allowed me to have the flexibility to just grow Code of the West at a slow pace and not have to take outside investment, not have to worry about keeping the lights on, and that job's going away. I have like a month before I'm done, but I was told on Tuesday or Monday, one of the days, that I'm getting laid off. And that's fine. That's how it goes. It's, as I've said before, illusion or security is an illusion. You can't control what you can't control. And the only thing that I can control is what I put in to what I have. And that's Code of the West in this case. So I'm making a plan to survive. That's the best way I can put it. And I'll probably be doing, I'm of course going to keep doing freelance and have jobs coming in where I can. But my goal is to try to make Code of the West sustainable. And it makes me kind of feel a little uncomfortable, even though I started Code of the West as a business and it is a community. I don't want to turn it into an advertisement all the time. However, it is a full-time job and I need to get it to the point where it is self-sustaining. So I'm going to be talking about, or I guess showing and talking about the things that I make more on the Instagram and then here on the YouTube channel while I'm doing the podcasts and videos, which is a part of the plan moving forward. I'm going to be doing the podcast again like this once a week, and it's going to be video on YouTube, video and audio, obviously, and then just audio only on Spotify and Apple. And in line with that, I'm going to start a Patreon, which a Patreon, the best way I can put it, is like a Kickstarter that is not for like a one-off product. It's a way for crowdsourcing to work as a way to, just support on the long term a creator or a creative vision. If you know who Sean Ryan is, Sean Ryan does this model, and what he'll do is he'll put the video audio episode up on his Patreon like a week ahead of time. So if you're somebody who follows along, excuse me, get some water here. So if you're somebody who supports his Patreon, you get the opportunity to see the episodes and hear the episodes a week early, and then you see behind the scenes stuff. And I'm going to be doing behind the scenes stuff. You'll have access to the art that I use for the reels, that kind of thing. And I'll go into what Patreon is more in a different episode, but it's like a community hub. It's going to have chat community boards. It's going to have access to my Discord as well. So, and there's different tiers to that, of involvement and support. So right now, that's my immediate course of action. Of course, there is always the Code of the West store, which is and thank you to everybody who jumped in this week and bought a shirt, bought a poster, bought a sticker. You guys, help me keep the lights on, a couple more weeks. I really immensely appreciate it. And just anybody in general, that's sharing. I have friends and people I don't even know that'll send me messages and say, hey, I've been sending the courage video to everybody that I know, or I've been, sending the hope video. That kind of stuff is incredible. It makes a huge difference. And that's really the goal, is to, outside of supporting Code of the West, which is, I would say, like a 25-yard target. That's just so it can keep going and support the mission, which is to continue to grow this community of people, so that we can help change the world, change our environments, change our communities, or reinforce our communities and reinforce who we are, reinforce our sense of morality and our identity. That's my goal, so it's like, I think that's why I feel so uncomfortable talking about, like, hey, you can always buy something at the store, because my goal, it doesn't exist to sell t-shirts. The t-shirts exist to market and support the mission of Code of the West, which is just essentially a media company. It's just a thing that exists to inspire and hopefully educate in some ways. That's what it is. It's a tool, is what I think of Code of the West. And so all these things, the coffee, the journals, I got my daily record journal here. I just like making things. I like seeing something that I've pictured in my mind manifest in realities. This is just for me. I use journals all the time, but these are all the goal of Code of the West is to not just sell things. Like I said, the goal is to continue this large conversation about who we are as Americans and what that can look like in the 21st century. And all these things that I make and sell are just ways to keep the light. So I have some other things that I'm going to be doing too. Like I'm going to, I mentioned Carver. I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter here in a couple of months probably, where I'm going to, because that book's been out of print since 2016, 17-ish. And I have people who are asking, every once in a while about where they can get that book. And since it's out of print, you really can't. So I'm going to do a Kickstarter, hopefully, and I'm going to get that book back in print. So that'll be, a way to support me, support Code of the West. But I'm just really excited to tell stories again in that way. I miss making comics. I just don't like the comic book industry. That's why I quit. But I love comics. I love making comics. And it's like the goal would be to, on one hand, just have a component of Black Rifle, a component of Code of the West that's just a publisher. I have I have all sorts of ideas about how I'm going to do that, what I'm going to do it with, and that's super exciting. And that's really where I'm at right now with all this. I've burned the ships before. That part's not new. It's always scary when you do it, but ultimately, this is what it means to live with courage. This is why I have it in the logo. It's not just for you, for me. I have to remind myself because it gets really easy to be comfortable and really buy into that illusion of security. If you have a dream and you have a goal, and if those dreams and goals are kind of abnormal beyond, say, like wanting to have a 9-to-5 job that pays a decent salary and have a couple kids and a wife. That's pretty normal, I'd say, and pretty achievable. If you have anything outside of that, you're going to have to step into some uncomfortable spaces in order to try and realize your dream. Well, I'm remembering that, and that excites me in line with the terror and the stress, which I'm sure is part of the reason why I woke up at 3:30 a.m. this morning. I don't know what's going to happen. I only have this loose plan, like I'm lining out for you. But I'm excited. I'm terrified, but I'm excited because this is what it's all about. This is risking it for the biscuit. 125,000 of you will be able to watch me either fall flat on my face or, keep this thing going. I'm hoping it's the latter, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I have no way of knowing how I'm going to pay my bills 30 days from now. So I'm just going to see what I can do. It's not going to be Code of the West. It's going to take a long time to get it really self-sustaining, but this is the fire that I needed to really go after making that a reality. So for that, I am grateful to the universe for it. Yeah, I'm grateful for all you being here and supporting, and I hope that you stick around because I think it's going to be pretty interesting. And hopefully this uncomfortable, strange, exciting adventure I'm about to go on will help inspire some other people to go after what they dream about doing and care about. And I think the world will be a better place for that. I really do. And so in the meantime, just, I hope you keep showing up, commenting, sharing. It's been really the best part of this whole experience, getting to know all of you and seeing the community grow. And I can't thank you enough. It's just absurd to me. 125,000 people is more than an NFL stadium of people. It's more people than are at the Super Bowl. And I would say we've just started. So I can't wait to see where this thing goes. And that's all due to you. My hat is off to you. I truly appreciate you. I hope you stay tuned. And I look forward to seeing what's going to happen.